everybody, and welcome to another episode of Underdog Podcast. My name is Patrick. I'm here with James.
What's going on?
And Gerald.
Hello, hello.
And we have a great show for everyone today. We got some NFL Week 7 takeaways, as well as the NBA season is upon us. So that means we got our takes on stuff that happened around the league. And we'll finish off the show with a new monster that's been created in the welterweight division in UFC. So tune in to the end of the show and find out who that is. And before we jump into the topic, we'd like to thank Design Mentality for sponsoring the podcast. And now we'll jump into the NFL. So last week, our feature game of the week was the New England Patriots versus the Atlanta Falcons in what was going to be a rematch from the Super Bowl, that epic collapse. So there was a lot of expectations going into the game. So we're going to throw it to James now to kind of talk about a little bit of what happened and a little bit of disappointments from one side, especially if you're a Falcons fan.
Yeah, so basically the way the game went was pretty disappointing. I believe it was 26-7 if I'm not mistaken. Let me just confirm.
It was a whole lot to not a lot.
Yeah, so it was 26-7, 23-7. And basically from the beginning of the game, Atlanta just kind of looked out of sorts. They didn't look like they had their groove going. It was the first touchdown the first touchdown for Julio Jones this season, which is shocking. And if you actually watch the game, the touchdown only came in garbage minutes towards the end. There was a crazy stat going out there that basically from the third quarter onward in the Super Bowl. So I think it was 2 minutes to go in the third quarter. They were up 28-3. The Patriots scored, I think, 54 straight points on them before they scored a touchdown, including obviously this game. So yeah, they just didn't look very impressive. They're missing some guys on defense, but at the end of the day, I think what it comes down to is play calling. And you got to put a lot of this on Matt Ryan. He's just making bad decisions, turning the ball over when normally he wouldn't be turning the ball over. They have such a good running game with Freeman, and they just don't give him the ball enough.
Now, is this the case of just the New England Patriots having their number, or was it something with their preparation? Because they were getting a lot of these questions about the Super Bowl, you know, how do you take that out of your mindset? And they said, no, we're not thinking about it. So were you kind of surprised at how they came out? Especially with all that, background noise that they were supposed to
I was surprised how they came out just because the Patriots haven't looked very good yet this year. So the fact that the Patriots haven't looked very good this year and now you're coming in and you still are struggling against them, what is that saying about you? Every quarterback going into this week against New England had put up 300 yards. Matt Ryan was the first quarterback this season not to be able to put up 300 yards, and all the weapons you have in Sanu, Julio Jones, Freeman out of the backfield, Coleman out of the backfield. You got a lot of weapons on that team. So I just think for them to go out and not get 300 yards passing, that's kind of an indictment on them, their offense, because that's basically what made them last year. They were so potent offensively that their defense didn't really have to be all that great. They kind of created a lot of turnovers, and that's where they found their success. But with the offense looking as suspect as it is right now, I just think this team has a lot of figuring out things to do. Since they lost their offensive coordinator, things have changed for them. So I think they've just got a lot of figuring out to do. Maybe the play calling needs to go to somebody else. Who knows? I don't like what Steve Sarkisian is doing. He basically got hired at the end of the year by Alabama, had a rough final. He was the offensive coordinator for Alabama in the national championship game, which Alabama lost. Yeah. And then after that, he got hired as the offensive coordinator on Atlanta to fill in for Shanahan. So I just think he's struggled so far this year calling the plays, and I think he's not I don't understand how you're not getting Julio Jones the ball. When you have a guy like that on your team, you need to Antonio Brown in Pittsburgh. He got targeted 19 times in one game. You could argue, okay, maybe that's a little too much, but when you have a guy like Antonio Brown, Odell Beckham Jr., Julio Jones, you target them 19 times.
You got to give them the opportunity.
Give them the opportunity to make plays. Put the ball in their hands. So I think Atlanta this year have kind of dropped the ball offensively, and it just hasn't looked great.
Yeah, and another thing that's scary is the Patriots, who struggled beginning of the season, have now looked like they've gained their footing and have been looking better and better as each game goes on. So this is another thing to look at, that the Patriots could be back to the form that they had towards the end of the last season with the addition of Gronk, even though he didn't really play that well against the Falcons. Didn't really need it with how much Brady was going off.
Yeah. And that's the thing, their defense played a little bit better in this game, so I do want to give the Patriots a little bit of credit. But at the end of the day, I still believe that the Falcons should have been able to at least make it competitive.
Yeah.
I thought that New England would possibly win the game just because they have Tom Brady, and then Tom Brady over Matt Ryan, I'm going to side with Tom Brady any day. But the fact that you just basically, it was a repeat of the Super Bowl. You just got blown out for 3 quarters. It
wasn't even a repeat. It was a repeat of the second half.
Yeah, exactly. Till you scored a touchdown right at the end. So it was just embarrassing for Atlanta, and I hope to God they figure it out soon because they have way too much talent on that team.
I don't know. I think I'm ready to call the curtain on Atlanta, because it not only did this happen in the Super Bowl to the Patriots, it happened to the Bills earlier, or Miami last week.
Yeah.
So
it just hasn't looked good.
Yeah, there's something that needs to change, whether it's the play style or play calling, but they can't continue like this. All right. So next topic is Super Bowl matchups in the NFL. So right now it's looking like Philly is the heavy favorite after their performance that they had this past Monday against Washington, with Wentz throwing in an MVP caliber performance with 4 touchdowns, controlling the whole game, rushing, I think, over 60 yards, getting those first downs that he needed. Does this basically solidify Philly as a Super Bowl favorite now for you, James?
Yeah, I think right now in the NFC you have to. I mean, I don't really know what the argument for any other team would be. The Eagles did just lose their left tackle,
Jason Peters. They announced today that it's an MCL and an ACL. So he's going to be done for the season and possibly career. He's old, so we don't know he's thinking, if he's thinking about retirement or coming back. Normally when guys get injured, they like to come back at least for maybe 1 season, just so they can kind of go out on their own terms rather than an injury kind of holding them out. So I think possibly there's a possibility for him to return, but obviously that's not going to happen. You've got to look at age, torn MCL and ACL, so it's going to be quite
It's going to be a lot
hectic
for sure.
surgery. But, we talk a lot about O-line and how special they are to offense and protecting the quarterback and the running back. Do you see that this being a very big blow to their Super Bowl hopes now? Because they haven't played a game without him yet. And I know last year they had a lot of problems without Lane Johnson.
Yeah, I think, offensive lines are always hard to predict, hard to tell. We're not going to know until we see what they look like for at least, I would say, 2 weeks without him. I do like the backup they have in there. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce his name. It's like Boyatai or whatever, but I'm just going to leave off that. Number 72 we'll go with. I like him a lot, and I really think he's played well, and he has spelled minutes for Peters here and there in the last couple seasons, because Peters has had a couple times where he's gone down or had an injury, he's sat a game. So I'm not ready to. I think last year was a little different when they lost Lane Johnson for 10 games because Carson Wentz was still a lot younger, and he was still kind of learning younger when it comes to being in the league. And I think now that it's his second year, he was even talking yesterday prior to the game saying that he feels like the game has kind of slowed down for him now. His preparation is meaning more in the beginning of the week. It's just a little bit.
You're seeing him evolve now.
Yeah, it's a little bit different of a feel. And I think whenever you have a great player and the game starts to slow down for that player, that's when they're really deadly, because they're kind of picking and choosing their spots. Instead of panicking in the moment, they're making good decisions. So I definitely think Carson Wentz is going to have less time, but the one good thing about him is he's a very mobile quarterback. He can get out, he can scramble, as we saw in the game yesterday. So even if they do have some issues, right away, I would lean more towards this won't be a huge deal, but they're obviously going to miss him. He's a Pro Bowl left tackle, so they're going to miss him, but I think they'll be okay.
You did mention a key point now with possibly the O-line, degrading a little bit. You're going to need him to step outside the pocket and be a little more mobile in case that pressure collapses. And it's good to have a guy like Wentz who just, whenever you need to, will just truck linebackers, which I do not like to see.
We don't want him to do that, but I still think that, it's been okay for him because the last game we watched last night, he was starting to get down more. Yeah. The game prior to that, he was taking some big hits that we definitely don't want to see a quarterback take, any quarterback, because it's just too risky. But yeah, I think he'll get smarter.
6'5", 240, so he can definitely take.
You don't want to become Cam.
No.
Where you're just getting drilled so much to the point where like Cam's punch drunk now. He's had that one season where he got 45 touchdowns because he was basically running the ball like crazy, and they destroyed the guy. The guy's struggling to even put together good seasons, and that's what starts to happen when your body starts to break down. So,
RG3, same
yeah,
thing.
you don't want to do that with him, and he's such a great pocket passer that you don't need to do it with him. Yeah. So get out and run when you need to, but
that's also the maturity too, where he needs to read the plays a lot quicker and be like, you know what, I don't need to take that extra 5 yards and take punishment. I'd rather go out.
And
I
think
earlier.
One of my criticisms that I would say for Wentz is I feel like Wentz needs to learn that sometimes it's okay to go 3 and out, or sometimes it's okay to not get a touchdown. I understand, or a first down, or whatever it may be. I understand that's the point of the game, but sometimes it's better to live for the next play.
Yeah.
And you know what? If it's the second quarter, and even if you're down a score or 2 scores and you really, really need that first down, you really want that first down, you know what? Next time on offense, let's not put ourselves in the position where we're in 3rd and long, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 15, whatever it may be, and just live to play another play. I think that's the one thing he's got to learn, because there's a couple times even when I'm watching the game where I'm like, the first down will be great and nice, and this team really needs it, but it's not worth that. It's not worth putting your body on the line like that, because it's just one wrong hit. I mean, not to go on to a different sport, but we saw in basketball, Gordon Hayward with his injury at the beginning of the season. You land wrong, you bump into somebody, like anything can happen, and it could be a serious injury. And in football, it's even more serious because there's contact. So I think for him, the best thing he can do is learn to, you know what? Let me live for the next play. Let me move on. And next time, don't put myself or my team in the position where I'm going for 3rd and 15, 3rd and 10.
Okay, so now the other side of the ball, I should say, we have Philly. Now, do you think New England is the other favorite to meet them and have that rematch of that Super Bowl? Or do you think that right now it's kind of too early to call New England?
No, I think New England would be a good choice. I mean, they're definitely it's hard not to say they'd be a good choice. They're always at least in the conference finals, conference championship. So, I think they'd be a good pick. But I think I would go with Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, the offense has kind of struggled through the beginning of the year. Big Ben had his obvious comments where he was contemplating retirement in the offseason, and after he had that bad game where he had 5 interceptions, like, maybe I don't have it anymore. Kind of just getting a little emotional in the moment. But I think now that they've settled down a little bit, they've understood that they have the best running back in football, and possibly one of the best running backs of all time in Le'Veon Bell. And I think they're feeding this guy the ball more. Whenever they give him the ball more than 25 carries a game, I think their record, I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's something outrageous. So I think for them, they've kind of started to learn their identity. Let's run the ball. We have Antonio Brown. We're going to take shots down the field. If you double team Antonio Brown, we have that Schuster, what's his name? Jimmy Schuster, whatever his name is, and then also Martavius Bryant. Those are 2 other deep threats, wide receivers that can really take the top off a defense. So having those 2 guys in single coverage when Antonio Brown is getting double covered, their offense is basically unstoppable, and their defense has been the big surprise this year, because last year they struggled on defense a lot, and we kind of expect Pittsburgh to always have a good defense. Because if you go back in history, that's the one thing they've, like the steel curtain, whatever they want to say.
Troy Polamalu.
Yeah, they've always had the Steel City because it's obviously
they're always tough to play against.
Yeah, they're always tough to play against. They've always had a good defense. And the last 2 or 3 years has been the first time in a long time where their defense has struggled. And this year their defense is, I think, number 2 or 3 against the run. So they're very, very impressive against the run. They're a lot better against the pass since they brought in Joe Hayden from Cleveland. So I like what I'm seeing from their defense. Their linebackers are good side to sideline linebackers. So they're playing really well. So I think based on all those things, I think by the time we get to the Super Bowl, Pittsburgh's a team where they just need a little bit of time to gel. They kind of remind me of Cleveland in the NBA. They have so much talent that they just need games to play with one another so they can kind of learn their roles. And as they learn their roles, they're just going to get better and better. So I think we're going to see an all Pennsylvania Super Bowl. Philly versus the Steelers. How interesting would that be?
That would be pretty dope.
The state of Pennsylvania would be very happy.
Okay, so finishing off the NFL, we'll move into our feature game of the week. So last week we picked the Patriots to beat the Falcons. I think it was unanimous between us. And, no shocker, right?
Surprise, surprise.
So this week's feature game of the week is chosen Dallas versus Washington. So right now the lines favor Dallas, being 2.5 favorite on the road, surprisingly. So, Vegas perceives them as the better team, with Ezekiel Elliott and Dak Prescott still playing. We don't know, that's still up in the air.
Zeke will play for sure this upcoming week. For
okay.
Sure. But anything after this upcoming week is in jeopardy right now.
Yeah, which is crazy that, he could have played. The reasoning for him playing last week or this week was pretty crazy, that the judge was on vacation.
Yeah.
So they had to push back his hearing so he was allowed to play and not serve his suspension.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Which you can argue, why do against San Francisco? You might as well take a game there so you only have 5 left.
But I think the one thing is, once the suspension starts, I think
you can't choose the games.
I don't think it's like pick and choose. I think once it starts and he starts serving it, that's it. So that's why the players, the player committee is basically, as soon as they get a ruling, they have to run to another court to see if another court would, cause that's basically what they're doing. The judge turned around and said, hey, look, you basically came too early. You didn't actually let the process through your own system happen. You basically didn't take the appeals committee in the NFL. You didn't listen to their hearing. You just knew what answer they were going to give you and you ran straight to the courts. The courts basically turn around and say, we don't accept that. You guys have to go through all of your things first before you actually apply for anything in the real courts. But now what they've done is they basically ran from Texas, a judge in Texas, to another judge. So now they're going to go to another judge and appeal with that judge. So it's just kind of a back and forth, see who can push paper the fastest to get the suspension either upheld or uplifted, whatever you want to call it. So I don't really want to get too much into the suspension, but for me, for the game, I think I'm going to take Washington. I'm going to take Washington, especially if you're giving me 2.5 points and they're at home. Solely for the fact that, well, they're at home, as I just said. Josh Norman is supposed to be back next week, so I think because they really missed him in the secondary against Philly. There was some big plays that Carson Wentz was able to expose them for. So I don't think, though, that Dak will be able to have that possibility next week if Josh Norman's going to be there. Not to mention, Josh Norman and Dez have a little bit of history, so whenever they play against each other, it's always fireworks. So that should be interesting to see. But I just think Washington right now, less distractions as a team. They're not dealing with all this crazy stuff. Like Jerry Jones has made a bunch of comments about the national anthem, saying if people should stand or not stand, and if they do kneel or whatever, they're going to be suspended. So there's a lot of kind of controversy going around the Cowboys, not to mention the suspension that we just touched on. So I think right now the Redskins, they lost the game here against the Eagles, which was a divisional game. They're now going to go up the Cowboys, which is another divisional game. I think they come out kind of wanting to rewrite the ship. They lost against Philly. Maybe they feel they should have won, or they could have won against Philly if they did have all their pieces in Josh Norman. So I like Washington too. Like, they were high up in our power rankings here last week. So that tells you that I'm pretty high on Washington. So I think for me, definitely Washington. I think Washington wins it by at least a touchdown.
Okay, so James, you have Washington. Gerald, who do you have?
I think the Cowboys are still a little rattled by the fact that they're not performing to their potential this year. So I'm picking Washington.
Okay. Gerald, Washington. You know what? Just because I think it's going to be Zeke's last game, he's going to go out with a bang, and he's just going to dominate Washington. So as much as being a Philly fan, this is going against my heart.
Well, I guess either of them going against, because Washington and
Cowboys. But I'm okay with Washington. Like, I'm kind of a fan of Kirk Cousins, but Dallas is just, sorry, you can't go there. But you know what? This one, I'm gonna have to go with the Cowboys.
Okay.
Something about me just thinks that they're gonna show up.
Okay.
Especially since I lost fantasy because of Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah, I guess now you're rattled after that week.
Yeah. Okay, so that wraps up our NFL. Actually, no, we got our undisputed top 10.
Yes, we do.
For James and Gerald, so take it away.
Yep, and starting off at number 10, the Panthers.
Yeah, Panthers have dropped a little bit. They did have an embarrassing loss this weekend, but I'm still holding out faith in Cam. I believe that he can kind of turn this around by a good game next week. So they've dropped down from 7 to 10, but they've got to show us something this week if they want to stay in.
Mm-hmm. And back up on the list at number 9 are the Bills.
Yeah, Bills have been playing decent, so got to give them some credit. I like what they did this week against the Buccaneers. They played Tampa Bay and they got the win. It was a close game, but they got the win, so that's what's important. They've been jumped back up.
Mm-hmm. And making our list for the first time this season at number 8, it's the Seahawks.
Yeah, I was kind of debating this last week if the Seahawks should get in, but I think it's time to put the Seahawks in now. They did only play the Giants this week, but they did hold the Giants to only 7 points, which some of the other teams the Giants have played this week or this year have been able to. The Giants have been able to put up some points on them. But the Seattle's defense is starting to come together, and what's even more crazy is they scored 24 points, which is very rare for Seattle. Their offense had been struggling because their offensive line all year, so it was good to see them get on the wagon there with some offense.
Mm-hmm. And up next, speaking of newcomers, making our list for the first time ever, it's the Saints in at number 7.
Yeah, so the Saints have been playing really, really well. They lost their first 2 games and they're now 4-0 since then. They have beat some good teams as well, even though Green Bay, they played this week and they won by a touchdown, or I think a touchdown and a field goal, 10 points they won by. And Packers obviously didn't have Aaron Rodgers because of the injury, so that's a huge factor there. But I just like what I've seen from the Saints defensively. I always have a lot of faith in their offense because they have Drew Brees. Mm-hmm. I think I've thrown out the stat multiple times on the pod talking about he's in the NFL, they've only had, I think, 9 or 12 times that a quarterback has ever thrown for 5,000 yards in a season, and Drew Brees has done it 5 times.
Yep.
So this is a guy, when it comes to offense, he will score points. He just needs the defense to kind of step up and hold a team under 30 for once, and that's basically happening this year with the Saints defense. They're a lot better than what they were last year.
Yep, and up 3 spots from number 9, the Vikings are taking the 6th spot this week.
Yeah, I really like what I'm seeing from Case Keenum. I think I might be prepared to say that he's the best backup in the league. I like Case Keenum's kind of come in there and quietly really done really well. He's, if you think about it, their third stringer. If you think about Bridgewater and Bradford, both of them going down. Obviously, Bridgewater went down last year, but I like what I've seen from Case Keenum. He's still making sure the weapons are getting their touches. Stephon Diggs. They've even lost Cook, but Latavius Murray's playing really, really well for them as well. So I like what I'm seeing from this team, and I think they can sustain this, and especially with Green Bay going down in the division, I have them winning the division from here on out.
At number 5, you have the Steelers climbing 3 spots from last week.
Yeah, so I wanted to push these guys a little bit more, but I want to see what happens this week with the Steelers. So Try not to get too excited. They're playing the Lions this week, so that'll be kind of a good test to see where they are. That's a game they should win, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, like we talked about before, Pittsburgh's been playing really well this year. They struggled out of the gate, but they've really been putting together some good wins. So their defense has been playing a lot better for once. So it's good to see them playing well.
Next up, the Rams, have climbed one spot to number 4.
Yep, the Rams have been impressive here as well. I like what I'm seeing from them. They had a good win this week against the Cardinals. They actually shut the Cardinals out 33-0. I just think Jared Goff has just taken a huge step this year when it comes to him kind of leading the team and running the offense. I'm really happy what I've seen from him. Gurley's getting back to the running back that we all thought he was going to be. So he's looked great, and their defense is not great, but it's a defense that can hold up in the NFL. So I like what I'm seeing from these guys, and I think these guys have a good shot at making some noise in the playoffs.
Now, dropping from the number 1 spot for the first time this season, we have the Chiefs at number 3.
Yeah, so I really debated between the Chiefs and New England at 3, but I wanted to move New England up because I was happy with what they did against the Falcons this week. And I know that Kansas City holds the head-to-head matchup against the Patriots, so normally I don't like to put a team that has the head-to-head matchup above them, but it's just too much for me to put Kansas City up there with the 2 losses that they've had. New England, like I said, the Super Bowl rematch they just had, they played really well. It wasn't like it was a close game and they just irked it out. It was a really good game. So, yeah, Kansas City at 3.
And riding high off that win against the Falcons, the Patriots are at our number 2 spot.
Yeah, Patriots, they're starting to kind of find their groove again. Everyone was kind of panicked after the first 2 games of the season. Wasn't really sure if Brady was done or Belichick not know what he's doing anymore, but they've slowly found a way to figure it out. Defense looked great against Atlanta. Such a high-powered offense, and to only hold them to 7 points, and those 7 points coming in the last couple seconds last couple minutes of the game, I just think that's really impressive for New England.
And finally, hitting the ceiling of the underdogs undisputed top 10, the Eagles for the first time.
Yeah, I think it's hard not to say the Eagles are the best team in football right now. They have the best record. Obviously, as we touched on earlier, the lineman going down, Peters, is going to be huge for them. We'll see kind of what happens over the next couple weeks. But this week they are playing San Francisco, so I mean, I don't think you're going to get any answers this weekend about Peters. But once they play a good team, we'll see where they land. But right now, Eagles the team to beat.
And that's it for the underdogs undisputed top 10.
Okay. All right. That finishes up our NFL section. Now on to the NBA. So we have standouts from week 1. The season started on Tuesday. Pretty memorable with Gordon Hayward. We talked about going down. Now, as the dust sort of settled in the NBA, we're sort of seeing patterns and how teams are looking in their future outlooks. What kind of standouts do you have from so far, James? You know, any big disappointments or surprises?
Yeah, I'm kind of I don't really know which category to put it in, but for me, I think Lonzo Ball is the one that I kind of wanted to bring up. I guess I was definitely expecting more out of him. So far this year, he hasn't really looked great offensively. I have questioned his ability to make shots in the past, but the more I watch him play, I think that's going to be an area that he's really going to struggle with his game, being a shot maker. And I just think he's in the half court, he struggles a lot. So unless he's kind of out on the fast break, he hasn't looked great. And there's a bunch of rookies that have looked a lot better than him this year. So for him to be the number 2 pick, and obviously I know his dad had a big factor in his draft, where he got drafted and all that stuff that happened, but like throughout the draft. But I've just been, I guess, disappointed is the word I should use. But cause the way he was marketed coming into the league, you were expecting kind of a LeBron type player, right? Someone who was going to come out and immediately make a difference. Yeah. Not necessarily be LeBron. I just mean LeBron, when he first got into the league, he was giving you 20 points. He was giving you 5 rebounds, 5 assists. He was instantly making a difference for his team. I kind of expected that for Lonzo. I do like what I've seen from him passing the ball, but passing's not enough. Like, he's had games where he's getting good assists. He's not getting lots of turnovers. So that is good. But I think at the end of the day, you have to be able to put the basket in the hole. And that's something that he looks like he's struggling with so far.
Yeah. Like I've been kind of critical about Lonzo Ball in the past on the pod, just because I think a lot of his, like potential has been manufactured by LeVar.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't trust picking him that high, but now that all the dust settled and he's playing, I feel that, like you said, he struggles to create a shot a lot in the half court, and that's a big part of being a point guard, at least running the offense. And I feel with the system that they have in LA, the assists are really meaningless, because you can throw any legit, I shouldn't say legit, but any point guard that knows how to run the position, and you can get a fair amount of assists. That's not what we're looking at. We're looking at how do you manage the game when you guys are up, when you're down. Are you guys getting good shots? And I just don't feel that. But in the transition offense, he definitely shines. Has a lot of length. He's 6'6". But I just feel like that's not enough for being a number 2 pick. But we haven't seen a lot either from Markelle Fultz, the number 1 pick for the Sixers. I just read today that he had fluid in his shoulder drained because he hasn't been able to lift his arm into a shooting motion. So it kind of puts together those pieces where I was wondering how he was struggling so much. We were seeing some free throw forms that we've never seen before from him. So I don't know if he was just, affecting his confidence, or he's trying to look for a better free throw form, but it looks now where he can't. He was just trying to physically give the team everything he could. But smartly, the Sixers have decided to shut him down. But one kind of, shocker or surprise of the season is the Memphis Grizzlies. For me, is they're 3-0. They had big wins against Golden State and Houston. So they're definitely in the top 10 that were debuting this week in the NBA. So you'll find out which one they are. But they're doing all this with grit and grind, surprisingly, because Tony Allen and Zach Randolph, are not on the team anymore, and they were kind of the ones who created that culture years ago. And but this year that they have James Ennis, they have guys that have been fringe NBA players that are putting up starter numbers. So I feel like this team is a lot better than individual assets that they have. So that was one big surprise for me, a good surprise. And Gerald, do you have anything to add?
Kind of the opposite of James. I just wanted to highlight more of the young guys. Like even Lonzo isn't doing that bad. Like he's playing all right. He's not playing near to his potential.
Yeah.
I'm talking like Ben Simmons though. Like he's getting almost a triple double. It's only been 3 games, but he's only 3 assists off a triple double. Lauri Markkanen on Chicago, he's averaging 17 and 10. Like,
yeah, no,
this hasn't happened in so long.
Yeah, I like what I'm seeing from the rookies, and I do think Pat's a little hard on him. Like the one thing I will admit about Lonzo, that I'm prepared to say that I think he's legit in, is I do think he has good court vision. I think he is a great passer, but I'm worried that even though you are a great passer, if you can't get your shot off, and you're not at least serviceable offense, like when it comes to scoring the basketball, I just don't know how that's going to work.
You're not going to be an all-star.
Yeah, I've never really seen a point guard that's just like, cause even Jason Kidd, he was a great passer, but he could at least score. Like he had ways of getting the ball, like getting you 15 points, 10 points occasionally. But with Kidd,
he was one of the best rebounding guards in NBA history. So like he was bringing other things to the table that, like, I know I'm harsh on Lonzo, but to be honest, you stick Calderon in that starting spot with those minutes, like I see better assist numbers, better to
But
turnover.
Have you watched a lot of the games? Cause I've watched a few of the Laker games so far and seen some highlights, and obviously watching highlights, you're not seeing everything, but some of the passes he's making, I'm impressed. Like these are not passes.
Of course.
That you
I'm not saying that he's a bad passer. That's his best asset, but the fact that like, touting this guy, one of the best passers of all time coming out of UCLA, it's a bit outrageous because you're comparing him to Kidd, you're comparing him to LeBron. I haven't seen all these comparisons to Simmons. I think Simmons is a better passer than Lonzo by far.
I agree. I think Simmons is also a better passer, but I think Lonzo and Simmons I don't want to compare them to guys like LeBron because you got to prove yourself more before, and Kid and all those guys, because you got to prove yourself more before we can put you on that level. But I think both of those guys have the potential to get to that level when it comes to their passing ability, court vision, seeing the floor, even in the fast break. Lonzo just has a knack for putting the ball in the right spot. But like I said, where I worry about Lonzo is not passing the ball. I think he's fine passing the ball, but offensively, when you have to score buckets and your team needs at least 10, 15 points from you in a game, I think he's going to struggle to produce that in the NBA. And if he's averaging 4 or 5 points a game and 10 assists, like at some point as a team, you got to put that on the bench. That can be a good bench player in the league, but you can't start giving us that kind of production. So I just worry going down the road to see where this is all going to come together. I think he's a great passer, but I almost think that he should just change a little bit of his shot, because it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't look right when you're watching him take shots, even in warm-ups. There's something about it that I don't feel like it's going to be successful going forward. So I think that's something that he needs to look at. But I do think when it comes to being a passer, I don't want to say an all-timer, but I think this guy's potential to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So far, though, compared to a lot of the other young guys in the league, a lot of the rookies, he's just not even comparable. He just hasn't been playing.
Yeah, I think this year as well was this year and last year have been great for us to because being a big LeBron fan, like as LeBron kind of gets towards the end of his career, as we just see him bang a three, but as he starts to get towards the end of his career, I sometimes wonder to myself, like, what superstar am I going to be so addicted to after LeBron's gone? Like, we're the league, we need more good young players coming in. And I think in the last year, we've seen a lot of really, really good young players coming into the league. So I think that's good for the NBA. I think the NBA is in a great place right now, and I really like a lot of these stars that are coming in.
And you know what's some of the other guys I wanted to highlight, not even just rookies, but a lot of the young guys on the Raptors right now carrying that bench. In their first 2 games of the season, they played their bench almost half the game.
Yeah, I've been very impressed with OG. I think he's played really well, and he's a rookie this year. So to see that's really, really impressive. Mm-hmm. So
him, Jakob Poeltl.
So now, speaking of the Raptors, we have a little bit of a segment talking about where they look now that JV has went down with a foot injury, out indefinitely. He's going to be reevaluated as time goes on, but there's no timetable for return. So that's a little tough to gauge now the Raptors' potential, but they're going to have a lot of guys that need to step up, especially in the front court.
Yeah.
So do you see that this is going to be a big blow for the Raps, or is it just next man up, guys that haven't really had much of an opportunity, like Siakam, Podol, Nogueira, and it's their time to shine?
I think that the Raptors are at their weakest at the center position after Valanciunas. I think at other positions they have the depth to replace what's lost, but I think with Valanciunas going down, they don't have the intimidation factor in the center anymore. They don't have the offensive proficiency, and they don't have the rebounding.
It definitely showed against San Antonio last night.
Yeah, San Antonio's a well-coached team, so whenever you go up against a team like San Antonio, when they see that you're missing JV, where do you think they're going to try and make you pay? On the rebounds, because they're a smart team. They have a smart coach. He's drilling that into them the entire game. You got to beat them on the board. You got to be the first one to get the rebound. So, I just think for Toronto, they need to use this JV time that he's going to miss to see if they do have the potential to be better without JV. Run a little bit more. Be faster up and down the court. Be more athletic up and down the court. Hustle more.
Put Ibaka at the center?
Yeah, maybe put Ibaka at the 5. Just start playing around with some lineups and use this opportunity to make yourself a better team. Yeah. Maybe you put Ibaka at the 5 and you start Siakam at the 4 instead of having Lucas Nogueira starting at the 5. There's many things they can do, and I think that's what Toronto needs to do going forward. They need to use this opportunity to maybe find that small ball lineup, the one we always talk about in Golden State where Draymond plays the 5 and they're so deadly. The Raptors can have a lineup like that with the kind of roster they have.
They have the talent.
Maybe JV, when he comes back, he is a starter, but now you still have that lineup that worked so well when JV was gone that you can start to deploy in the playoffs, play a little small ball against teams. So I think if I'm the Raptors, it's early in the season. He's not going to be gone forever. He's going to be back eventually. Injuries for good teams, I always think, are kind of blessing in disguise as long as they're not super long term. It's almost the same as Cleveland with Isaiah Thomas. Isaiah Thomas is out for like until January, but they're going to have so much time to get other guys gelled in, ready to go. By the time a guy like Isaiah comes back, now you have Derrick Rose, who's kind of a starter, like he's been giving you starter kind of production. So that's the same thing with JV. Maybe there's another guy you can bring off the bench like a Siakam who you can take his game to the next level while you have this period of time. And that's what I would be looking to do if I'm the Raptors.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't think they can play the same way with Valanciunas gone as they could with him here. I think they're going to be forced to go to a smaller lineup with Ibaka at the center. I don't think they'll be able to start Lucas Nogueira or Siakam. Just the way that Valanciunas looks on the offensive end when he's got the ball into the basket, he looks at home. He looks like he knows what he's doing. He's calm. He's collected. He knows he can make his own shot there. Nobody else on the team, no other bigs on the team can do that.
Yeah, and I like the way that their style of their offense they're doing now, where it's much more free flowing, a lot more ball movement, and we are seeing JV kind of step up. And you can argue that he was their most consistent player before going down. So he definitely shows that he can play in that up tempo style. But the one thing with him is always when he's playing so good, he gets injured. Yeah, and so many times, almost every year he goes out for a month and you lose your rhythm. And, coming back to the starting lineup, it's hard after being off for a while. And I just wish that he had a little more consistency, with staying in the lineup. So it definitely will be interesting because if they do move Ibaka to the 5 and they start playing incredible, this is something you got to talk about.
But now that gives you the opportunity. Okay, let's trade him. So that's why I'm trying to say there's no disadvantage to this. But another thing as well that I just wanted to kind of get off my chest is we're talking a lot about Valanciunas here. Valanciunas is not the problem. These Raptors need to understand that you guys are in Toronto, man. To gain respect in this league, you have to work twice as hard. When you have a game that's on the line against a team like San Antonio and you can win that game easily and they don't have their best player, you cannot allow a guy like Murray to go out and get 15 rebounds. I don't care if their big man goes out and plays well, but when it comes to actually hustle and hard work, Toronto has to be that team that beats everybody to the boards. They're a good defensive team. They out-rebound guys. That's the kind of team they need to be if they want to win in this league. And to me, that's the next step they need to take to beat a team like Cleveland. And last night, it was just very disappointing to see the fact that they lost that game because, yeah, they were missing JV. I would not say JV's even their top 2 player on that team. So you have Lowry and DeRozan still. Those guys were healthy, and you allowed the Spurs to just beat you like that. And without having Leonard, I thought it was weak. I thought it was weak on their part. And that's the thing, though. Like, JV adds that toughness to the team in the post that they lack a lot of times when he's out of the lineup. So it's tough to say like whether or not they're better with or without him. I guess it all depends on what they'll get in return, because if they would have got a decent return, I think they would have, made a trade by now, because we have heard his name in rumors for a while now. Yeah, but I think the Raptors don't want to give him away for nothing. I think their asking price is pretty high.
Oh, so yeah. It should be, too.
That's why that we haven't really seen anything. But I think if the Raptors start playing really, really well, now that asking price maybe drops a little bit. Yeah. You know what I mean? Okay, you know what? We don't necessarily need him. We can bring in another shooter, another whatever you need. So it just depends on how they look without him. But either way,
yeah. They could use another shooter too. Yeah. Like they've been doing all right shooting from the 3. They've been shooting a high volume, but CJ Miles and to a degree Kyle Lowry have been the only ones making shots. But if they're going to get out-rebounded like they did last night, then you can't get rid of JV at all, because you need this guy ASAP. You're going to be losing a lot of games. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now moving on to our feature game of the week in the NBA. It's going to be a rematch of OKC versus Minnesota, where there was a lot of drama in their first game,
where it looked like Melo hit the game-winning three to go up by 1. And in the last seconds, and within 4 seconds left without a timeout, not only did Thibodeau mention or signal that he needed a timeout, which would have been a technical foul and pretty much put the game out of reach, there was an illegal screen that was made with the report that came out in the last 2 minutes that the NBA loves to do to put their refs on blast. But it created an opening for Wiggins, who hoisted a pretty deep three-pointer that he ended up hitting off the backboard and securing the win. So, this rematch is going to be a lot of emotions, and it'll be interesting to see how OKC bounces back from that tough loss, especially with all the reports coming out saying that, it maybe should have been their victory in the end. But at the end of the day, you got to give credit to Wiggins, who's having a very impressive start to the season and, showing that he's clutch once again, because he had a few game winners last year. So he's leaving off where he ended off last year. Mm-hmm. So, I'm picking in a rematch because it is in Minnesota. I'm going to pick Minnesota, not only because they're at home. I just feel that one of the weaker points or weaker parts of OKC is the paint presence. And I think Karl Anthony Towns will have his way with Steven Adams.
Yeah. I think for me, I'm going to have to go with OKC. I think, after the way they lost, they're going to be thin just because the game is so close to one another. I think they're going to remember that. You have a guy like Westbrook. This is a guy who tries to snatch people's hearts. So he's going to come out guns blazing after taking a loss like that. So, I'm going to ride with Russell.
I'm not sure what to think of OKC yet. I thought they'd be better, but only by a little bit. Just because there are 3 All-Stars coming together, that team, it's going to take a little while to learn how to play together. It's a home game for the Timberwolves. I'm going to go with them.
Okay. So Gerald going with the home team.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so now we're going to start off the undisputed NBA top 10 rankings.
Yep. For our first start this year. And starting off at number 10, we have the Bucks.
Yep. And Milwaukee holds all the letters to the alphabet in this one. And that alphabet is Giannis Antetokounmpo. Mm-hmm. And he's having an amazing start to the season. You argue front runner for MVP.
Oh, man.
And, not only is his play from a statistical standpoint impressive, but he's affecting the results in games. Where a close game in Portland, he had steal and then a finish, a dunk to pretty much close off that game. But they have big wins against Boston and Charlotte, with their only loss really coming to Cleveland, which shouldn't be that surprising with how good and how deep Cleveland is. But the one thing to mention with Milwaukee, and it's going to be important whether or not they're going to stay in this top 10 list, is the next 2 weeks they play OKC, they play Cleveland, San Antonio, and Memphis.
Yep.
So, we'll keep an eye on them and see how they do and whether or not they'll be still in the top 10.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of OKC, they're up next at number 9.
Yep, the three-headed monster. It's kind of disappointing start to the season because their only win is against the New York Knicks. But losses to Utah and Minnesota, that Minnesota game came down to the last minute, and, if the NBA had anything to say about it, they would have overturned it. So they could be just as easily 2-1, not 1-2. So I think the record doesn't say how good they are. That being said, they do have tough week, a few weeks ahead of them trying to get their chemistry together. But one thing I am really impressed with is how Westbrook has took playing with Paul George and Carmelo. He's showing that he can play with, guys who need the ball in their hands a lot, and he is maintaining the same numbers he has been last year. Maybe not points wise, but assists and rebounds, he's just up there like he was last year.
Yep. Up next, we got a team from the East. The Wizards are in at number 8.
Yeah, I would have put them a little higher if the 3 wins that they have would have been against better competition. But they do have I think the biggest chip on their shoulder in the Eastern Conference at least, just because they're always overlooked and, teams already after the Kyrie Irving trade, we're naming Boston as the second team in the East.
Yeah.
So things have changed pretty quickly. But wins against Philly, Detroit, and Denver don't really, speak much or don't stick out to me as much. But John Wall also playing like an MVP. And their upcoming games, they have the Lakers and the Sacramento Kings, but the big matchup is Golden State Warriors that they have this week. So that will give me a better gauge onto where they are on this list with how they do against Golden State. But a few players that are playing really well for this team from last year, they had trouble with their bench. This year they got guys like Oubre that are really stepping up. They have Otto Porter that's now showing that he's a two-way player, at least so far in the beginning of the season.
Yep.
So, maybe that outrageous amount of money he got in the offseason is, looking a little bit more reasonable now. I just hope that he can maintain that. And I gotta mention, the Polish Hammer, Gortat. The model of consistency, what you'll get with that big man. He's going to play tough. He's going to get you rebounds. He'll get you blocks. And he actually got a big steal against Denver to seal that win in the last few minutes before fouling out. So It's good to see that, as he's aging, he's like a fine wine.
It's always solid. Up next at number 7, we have a team that I've been wanting to put up in this list for a long time, the Timberwolves.
The young guns of the NBA, and they picked up big wins against OKC and Utah. Did lose against San Antonio, but, a lot of teams lose to San Antonio, and being young, it's a good learning experience for them. But one guy I wanted to really highlight, because we know what we're getting from Jimmy Butler and Karl Anthony Towns, is Wiggins, who actually became the youngest player to record 20-plus points in all 3 of his first games of the season at 22 years of age, which is kind of surprising that no one's done that.
Yeah.
But with, I guess, the rule change in age, not a lot of players are one and doneing or having a significant amount of minutes by their first or second year.
Yep.
But it's good to see from the Canadian who his nickname is the Maple Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of like that. But great offseason additions with Teague and Jimmy Butler. So it's really showing that they're having that consistency that lacked with that young team. And I think trading away Zach LaVine has done wonders for Wiggins, because that's opened up his minutes and his offense to where he's getting the ball where he needs to, rather than kind of fighting with the another combo guard on the floor.
Yep. And up next at number 6, we have the hometown Raptors.
Toronto, they're on the cusp of being legit contenders, and it seems like always something happens. Injury to Lowry, injury to JV, that kind of sets them back. But like James and Gerald mentioned early on in the pod, this does signify for good teams, other guys that need to step up and maybe get more comfortable with the team and the other guys in the offense. But JV going down does have alarm bells because of how badly they got out-rebounded in San Antonio. Mm-hmm. Numbers were 56-33. So you're not going to win any games like that, being out-rebounded by that much. And I'm actually shocked that it was that close of a game, because it came down to the last few possessions.
Yep, 4-point game.
Yeah, and they did kick off a tough West Coast swing for the Raptors. So not picking up the win against San Antonio is a little bit tough. But they do have Golden State Warriors next, the Lakers, Portland, Denver, and Utah. So it's their longest road trip of the season, which is good to get it out early. But if they can come out 3-3 out of this, I think that's a big win for them, especially with the caliber teams that they're playing against. And with JV going down, you need guys step up like Podol, Nogueira, Siakam. All have to step up now, give you that leadership on the floor and in the paint, that presence that is severely lacking now that JV's out of there. But another thing that Gerald mentioned is the young guys that are stepping up off the bench. So you have DeLon Wright, who's having a great season, OJ Anunoby, which is looking like a steal in the draft, where the Raptors picked him like I think 20th or 20th,
low 20s,
in the 20s, and he's just showing that that he came back from a serious knee injury. So I think a lot of teams didn't want to take that risk. But you know what? Good on the Raptors for seeing what what he brings to the table, and he's only going to get better once he gets his legs under him, because he wasn't even supposed to be back by now.
Yep.
And he came in for the preseason, so I think that surprised a lot of people, and, he's surprising everyone, at least me on the court. He's hitting 3-pointers that I didn't think he had in him this early, and just his size, he's NBA ready. He can guard the perimeter player. Not saying a guy like LeBron, but I think you can kind of groom him into being that elite type defender in a few years.
Mm-hmm. And up next, we have the defending champs, the Warriors at number 5.
Who have no conscience, whether that's on the floor or off the floor. Their comments, not really a fan of, but one thing you can't hate on is their talent. And they are the defending champions, which is why I think I still kept them in the top 5, even though they've had a 2-2 start to the season, losing to Houston and Memphis. So it does rear their ugly side in those losses where Draymond was out for one of the games, or one half of the game, and really exposed their lack of paint presence. And, teams can get what they want if they run their offense properly and expose those holes without Draymond. So overall, I'm unimpressed by the start of the season, but they are the champions. They are going to get back together and back to the drawing board. So, their outlook for this week is they have big 2 games against Toronto and Washington. Detroit, we don't really know what you'll get, but the Clippers is another one to highlight. So they got 3 potential tough matchups. So that will determine whether they'll stick in the top 5 or even move up.
Mm-hmm. And at number 4, we have the other team from the finals last year, the Cavs.
Yeah, another team that, maybe I shouldn't have had in the top 5 it's early just because of the big loss to Orlando, over 20 points. But I nicknamed them the Puzzle Masters because right now there's just so many pieces that they have to figure out how they fit together. And when they do, I feel like this is well, I shouldn't say undercover, but they will be the best team in the league. With their depth and just the amount of pieces, and D Wade already saying that he wants to come off the bench because of the struggles he had in the starting lineup. So, when you have a guy, a Hall of Famer that's willing to lose his starting spot for another guy, that just sends ripple effects along the roster. So how can you complain about your minutes if D Wade just removed himself from the starting lineup,
Yeah.
So, kudos to him. And they still managed a 2-1 record. And I still think they're in the sensitive part of their season. So the more games go on, the better we'll have a sample size that we can decide where exactly this team fits. But for now, they're at 4.
Yep. And up at number 3, Houston Rockets.
Yep. Houston, we have a problem. And that problem is for the other teams in the NBA because this team right now is looking really scary, and they're doing all this without Chris Paul. They beat the Warriors in the first game of the season, and it did showcase how Chris Paul and James Harden played together, which was surprisingly really well. It's unfortunate to see that Chris Paul went down again. For most likely, it's looking around a month. But, this is opening up spots for guys like Eric Gordon, who's having an incredible start to the season. Clint Capella is looking like a monster in the paint. And of course, James Harden, you know what you're going to get from him. So, it's interesting to see what they're going to do or how they're going to play in the future. But, the bench I wanted to highlight a few players that were really good and standout performances from Mbah a Moute and Tucker, who we know from the Raptors last year. So they're looking like big acquisitions, guys who can guard every position on the floor, and you really need that against a team like Golden State who play positionless basketball.
Up next, we've said it before, we'll say it again, the steady Spurs.
Model of consistency. What can you say? I was even hard on them saying, what, without Leonard, I'll give you guys a pass. You guys don't have to win early on. But what do? 3-0, perfect.
Yep.
So, model of consistency speaks again. And I think they really found a gem in the DeJounte Murray guy. Got to see him a little bit towards the end of last year. He looked a little bit uncomfortable, but this year he's come ready to play, and he stepped in perfectly for an injured Tony Parker, and it's almost looked like they haven't missed a beat with Leonard and Parker going out.
Absolutely.
So that's a guy to really highlight, and if you haven't picked him up in your fantasy, definitely do.
I know I did. And hitting our number 1 spot for the first time ever, the Memphis Grizzlies.
Yep, grit and grind lives on. You thought that identity was gone with Tony Allen and Zebo leaving, but they've shown that doesn't matter what starting lineup they have, as long as they got Conley playing well. They have Marc Gasol, that's a monster in the paint, and guys like James Ennis that are stepping up. So it's good to see that guys that you wouldn't think are really taking in these roles and taking advantage of it. And it's great to see a team like Memphis on top. Not many people had them very high on their list. So to see them pick up convincing wins against Golden State and Houston, who are both in the top 5, I think they're the only team to do that. Speaks volumes to how they prepare themselves, and that doesn't matter what team is playing against them, you're going to get 110% from them. And back-to-back games against the Mavs this week, they could even end up 5-0.
Absolutely. And that's it for our Underdogs Undisputed Top 10.
All right. Now finishing off this segment, I just wanted to talk a little bit of UFC over the weekend. Wasn't that big of a card, but it was in Gdansk, Poland, which is a great city, a beautiful port city. But that being said, there's a relatively no-name guy in Till facing a guy who's a legend in the UFC, Donald Cowboy Cerrone. It's kind of interesting because the more reading I do on it was such a mismatch from the beginning, because you have a guy who's Till who hasn't had a UFC fight yet, but has 15-0. Outside of the octagon. This is a guy who cuts from 205 to go down to welterweight 175. So we're talking 30 pounds of power that this guy maintains, facing a guy like Cerrone, who was in the lightweight division, who decided to move up just because he couldn't cut any longer. So as much as, it looked like Donald Cerrone was going to breeze by and he was the favorite, it looked the opposite of that, with Till knocking him out in the early first round. I know, James, we talked about it a little bit, but it is a big surprise to see Till. But the one thing is that, boom, now he's in the welterweight division that we didn't really have any guys that are contending with Tyron Woodley. He's had a few lackluster performances, but right off the bat after the win, you had a guy like Platinum Perry, who was at the event, came ringside, and they jawed at each other. So it looks like that might be the next big fight for him, and could lead to a potential championship belt.
Yeah, I think UFC needs to give him a couple more maybe 2 or 3 more matchups, because it was his first fight in UFC. So give him a couple more matchups in the division, see where he lands. But for him, I think great start, beating Cowboy Cerrone, that's
biggest fight of your career.
Yeah, that's not a joke. This guy's pretty legit. So it was impressive to see him get the win, and I'm kind of excited to see. Hopefully he can keep it up, and then that'll be another star that the UFC can have.
Yeah, and Donald Cerrone had a 6-month suspension because he tweeted out, or he Instagrammed his broken nose and giving props to Till for an amazing fight and game plan. And I always find that very, very crazy and graceful that guys, right away will be able to thank a guy for breaking his nose. I'd be kind of bitter.
You learned a lesson.
Yeah. So it's really awesome to see, a true martial artist and the respect they have for one another, even though that they basically beat the shit out of each other for, the better part of I shouldn't say better part of a round, but, as long as they were facing off against each other. So it will be interesting to see Till and where he goes from here, but I really want to see that fight with Platinum Perry, who both guys have a lot of power, and I think that one's going to be determining who is going to fight with Tyron Woodley for the title shot. So finishing off our show now, we'll do a little bit of fantasy talk. So we have our NFL and NBA. I guess we'll talk about NFL because I took down the only loss pretty handily, so that was pretty tough. I was against Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott, who combined for 70 points. So that pretty much ended my my week. But you guys picked up both wins. Yep. So right now James is still undefeated, feeling nice.
7-0.
Feeling
7-0.
How?
And me and Gerald are 4-3 now. So we tied it up now.
Still got that tiebreaker on you.
Yeah, so I think.
So you guys are fighting for the 4th spot, or you're 3rd and 4th?
I believe
second and third.
We're 2nd and 3rd now?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it depends on, because I think they add both conferences to the overall standing, so it's top 4
overall
teams.
we're second and fourth, or third and fourth rather.
Third and fourth. So yeah, all three of us are in the playoffs, but it's cutting close for us too. Like, we got to keep winning. Next week is going to be really important.
I only won by 10 this week, so I might have to drop some people.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Now NBA, we have all of us picked up wins.
Everyone got to win week 1. Yeah.
Me and Gerald are facing off this week now. That started on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
So you're up right now. You began today up by 70.
Yeah.
So it's going to be
more now. Are you? Well, Lauri Markkanen, who's playing right now, has 22 for me.
Yeah, he's going off.
And D'Angelo Russell's got 10, so that's another 32 for me.
Yeah, so it's
still pretty close. So Pat has 37 points today, and you have 32. Like I said, that matchup, I'm taking Gerald if Leonard's back, at least for a game, maybe 2. I would take Pat otherwise.
It's tough to say because anything can happen. Any guys go down. It's still early in the season.
I looked at the matchups. I just think based on the guys you have playing. But another thing is the guys all need to show up on what they're projected.
I'm really happy with my lineup this year. Everyone who I've kept has been playing really well.
But the one thing you have to understand is week 1 of the season. So things are going to change. We all know this. You've done fantasy before. Whoever's good in the first 2 months of the season may not be good in the last.
It's all about not getting trigger happy and start dropping guys who struggle because, they're going through growing pains with their teams.
Yeah.
Like a guy, I have Justin Holiday on Chicago that, I want to drop, but I know he has a big role on the team and he just has to get a good few games in him, but I'm pretty sure I've seen him hit a few good shots tonight, so I think he's doing pretty decently. He's gone to the line a bunch of times, but that's a guy that I really thought that would have a standout year.
Yeah, he's got you 12 points right now.
So there you go. All right, well, that ends off the show for this week. Thank you all for listening. You can check our YouTube page to check out all our latest podcasts. Yep. Also, if you want to check out underdogpodcast.com, that's underdog with DAWG, and check out our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagrams, and let us know what you think. Thank you all for listening once again.
Bye, everybody.
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 Once again.